I strongly identify with all that, and I wore the wrong outfit, clearly. So I am Dr. We will have a conversation about that one later. Dr. Nicola Fox-Hamilton, and I'm a cyberpsychologist, which, you know, when you say psychology, people always think that I'm analysing you. I'm not in person anyway. Online? Probably. Sorry. But it makes for a good conversation opener. So it used to be that nobody knew what it was, and I could tell them that it's basically about, you know, the psychology of how we interact with technology and how we interact with each other through technology, and that was all well and good. Now lots of people know about it, and they have opinions, like strong opinions, especially taxi drivers. They've done their research, and they know a lot more than me. I've learned a lot. But there's a lot of emotional rhetoric around cyberpsychology. Lots of moral panic. And moral panic's not a new thing at all. It's been around since like Plato. He wrote about how writing would implant forgetfulness in the minds of men, so that was the first technology. It's been going. My favorite one, though, is about trains. There was moral panic around trains, believe it or not. Apparently, we're not designed to go that fast. It would asphyxiate us. And women, in particular, not designed to go more than 50 kilometers an hour. Which is very specific. Something to do with our wombs, like flying out of our bodies, as they do, hysterically. But there's lots of moral panic around cyberpsychology, and I like to collect really terrible headlines because, like, if you didn't laugh at them, you'd cry. A couple of my favorites. So the thing that finally made me stop subscribing to The Guardian was the one that said, children are tech addicts and schools are the pushers. Unbiased reporting. My favorite, though, of all time is giving your kids a smartphone is like giving them a gram of cocaine. So I'd like to see how they got ethical approval for that study. There's like 3 groups of kids. This group, you're just going to stay over here nice and quiet. Look at your shoes. You're the control group. This group here, here's your iPhone. Off you go down the rabbit hole of the internet. And this group here, gram of cocaine. And let's compare them and see what the difference is. Because that happened. But there's lots of hot topics in cyberpsychology. Things like screen time for kids, you'll definitely heard of if you have kids or if you don't. Video games turning boys into killers. iPhones destroying a generation. 2 generations now. It was originally millennials, but it's Gen Z now. They're powerful things, those iPhones. But that's not my area. So I have a PhD in online dating. And you may wonder how one comes to a place where one has a PhD in online dating. It's a circuitous journey. I started as a graphic designer, so who knows? But I lived in LA for a while, and a few years, and I wasn't single there, but like, you know, you'd be out at a gig or a restaurant or whatever, and guys would come up to you and they'd chat to you and they might compliment you and start a conversation. They were usually sober. So it was kind of nice and normal. And then I moved back to Ireland, newly single. And a very short while later, I'm sitting in a suburban local pub with my parents at like 6 o'clock in the evening, having dinner. And a guy across the bar, who's very drunk, yells, "Hey, my mate likes you." I was 32. I thought with a sinking feeling that my love life was not going to be as straightforward as I thought it might have been moving home. So I tried online dating. And that was interesting. You know, one good thing about online dating is if you don't meet someone, it's fine, because you still have good stories to tell. But just in case any of them are here tonight, I'll be vague. So there's the usual stuff, like the guy who showed up a foot shorter than he was supposed to be and in hiking gear for like a dinner date. It's totally normal. Barely worthy of comment, in fact. There was the guy whose boss had suggested it might be time to find a wife, which was interesting. Didn't know quite what to say to that. And there was the guy who sent me a photograph after much, like, I was like, I'm not going to meet anybody who doesn't have a photograph. And he's like, oh, fine, I'll send you a photograph. So he emailed me a photograph. And I was like, dude, you're supposed to be 45. Like, this photo was taken in the 80s. You got a flock of seagulls haircut, and you're airbrushed, and you're 20 at most. He was very upset. Really, really annoyed at me. In hindsight, I'm with a PhD in online dating. His username, Mr. Champagne, probably should have been a red flag enough not to go there. So I got laid off in the recession. I was working in advertising, and I decided to go back to college, started a master's in cyberpsychology. And when it came to doing the research project, I was wondering, what will I do? And I thought, isn't online dating really interesting? Because you can actually see this stuff out there in a way that's actually measurable. So I compared American and Irish guys' online dating profiles to see what the differences were and to see how they talked about themselves. First, most obvious thing was that American guys have a lot more to say about themselves, like 3 times more than Irish guys. And I was looking to see how they talked about their personality. So I was looking at things like American guys talked a lot more about their friends and family and how important they were to them, which is kind of like agreeableness, people-oriented. They talked a lot more about work, so more conscientiousness maybe. But they didn't win in all the traits. So Irish guys, a little bit more language related to psychoticism and deception. Yay, well done. Very impressive. But interestingly, also tended to say that they were honest, genuine, trustworthy, sometimes all in the same profile. Maybe a little bit of overcompensation. So then I decided to do a PhD. God knows why. I'm still not sure that was a good idea. The reasoning is lost in the midst of time anyway. And I was looking again at online dating, and I wanted to look at how people talked about their personality, how they express it in their dating profiles, how other people perceive it. Because it's really interesting when you get to online communication. So when you're face-to-face with somebody, you've got all of these body language cues, nonverbal cues, their tone of voice, the speed they talk at, their pitch. You can see their facial reactions. You can see if their face is boiling, all of those kind of things. But when you're online, particularly with text, you can't. You don't have any of that. Now, we're pretty good. We adapt, and we can make up for it. But we're missing a lot of information. And so we fill in the gaps that we have in our heads by ourselves. And when we have an initial positive impression of somebody, we tend to fill it in with quite positive information. But what information we do have takes on heightened importance. So I wanted to look at profiles to see, how people perceive them. So we know that photos are the most important thing. Like anyone here who's online dated knows the photo is the most important thing, and so do the researchers. You'd still be amazed at the photos that people use. There's a whole Tumblr dedicated to Tinder guys with tigers. Because tigers are so hot when they're drugged. But I was looking at the language. And so I, spent quite a bit of time, did 3 studies, 7 years, in fact, 3 studies, 100,000 words, and the result of that was we're really terrible at telling what somebody's personality is like. We're actually really bad at it. We can't do it at all, which might explain why a lot of first dates are not great, bit of a disappointment. But it's not the only reason. So there's something called hyperpersonal communication. And that's basically when we're communicating, particularly with text online, and because we're missing loads of information, and because we might form an initial positive impression of somebody, we have something called the halo effect. It's like you put on rose-tinted glasses, you see a hot profile picture, rose-tinted glasses, view the whole profile and everything they write afterwards with, a positive glow. And you're missing information. So you fill in the gaps in your head, and you start to form this quite idealized impression of the person. And before you know it, the longer this goes on, the more you're talking to them, like in lockdown, for example, when you couldn't meet, the longer it goes on, the more this fantasy develops in your head and the more perfect they get. And before you know it, you're imagining your life together. You haven't met them yet. But you're imagining your life together. You're picking out that gorgeous 20th century, like Danish sideboard, fabric for the curtains, for the house you're going to have. You're naming your children. And like Connell's going to have his smile. And Daenerys is going to have my smile. I got to name the boys, he got to name the girls. It's an equal partnership. But then you meet, finally, in person. And no matter how nice they are, the gap between this fantasy and reality is too big. And you're just going to be disappointed, no matter who they are. and Connell and Daenerys just fade away. So I spent all this time looking at the intricacies of how we misunderstand each other and miscommunicate and perceive each other in online dating. But what are the things that people actually want to know? Because this is not what people are asking me about. There's 3 things that people want to know. The first one is, will you look at my dating profile? No. If you're a stranger asking me to look at your dating profile, it's rarely good. In fact, I cannot remember a single instance where it was good. I am definitely analysing you if you were asking me to do that. If it was one of you, yours is fine. Not you. If you're one of my friends, absolutely fine. But strangers, no. Second one is, if I go on online dating, will I get murdered? Or the adjacent question is, does everybody who goes online dating get murdered? I'm like, probably not. But, be safe. And then the third one, my absolute favourite, that I've been asked for years, is, Nicola, why do men send dick pics? And for ages, we didn't really have an answer. There was no research. You could theorise about why they might. But now we know. There's been quite a few studies. There's a small percentage who are doing it kind of like a flasher, so they're doing it to be manipulative, negative reasons, but that's a small percent. The other 90%, genuinely, it is a mating strategy. They think that we really like it, we get excited by it, sexually excited by their dick pics, that we will return nudes and want to hook up with them. So on that joke, I will finish my set. Thank you.